All right, everybody. Today's lesson is order of operations. So basically what we're talking about in this lesson is if we have some type of a math problem to do where there might be just more than one thing, something a lot harder than 5 plus 3, all right, where order of operations is when you get to a math problem where you might have add, subtract, multiply, and divide in there. And what we're really trying to figure out is, well, what do you do first for the operation? So what I want everybody to do right now before we get into the meat of the lesson here is I want everybody to, when I write the problem down, I want you to pause. I want everybody to try this just to see what kind of answers you get here. So here's the problem that I'm going to want you to try. I want everybody to try to do 20 minus 5 times 2 plus 8 divided by, and then in parentheses we're going to have 2 plus 2. And again, what I want you to do is to pause the video, and I want everybody to get an answer, and then we'll come back to this problem and figure out exactly what the correct answer should be. So go ahead and pause the video, solve the problem. Okay, so you should be back from solving the problem now. Again, the point of this is everybody in the room should be solving this the same way. That's why it's called order of operations. We need to know, well, what do I do first here, and then what comes next, and figure out the answer. So I'm going to tell everybody what the answer is. I'm not going to tell you how to solve it yet, but the final answer that you should have got here should be an answer of 12. All right, so if you got that answer, congratulations. You're ahead of the ball game here. So if you didn't get that answer, that's entirely the purpose of this lesson, is to know what to do first and how to solve. So we're going to come back to this problem after the lesson, or after we learn a couple things. Okay, so this sentence here, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. This is kind of the directions on how to do order of operations. Now, some of you, instead of please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, some people, depending on your teacher, might have just heard the word PEMDAS. And this is okay too. Both are great ways to remember how to do order of operations. When I was a young kid, my teacher always said, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So that's how I remember it. But if you want to shorten it up and just remember the word PEMDAS, because the letters in the word PEMDAS are actually the first letter in each word. All right, the P in please, the E in excuse, M in my, D in dear, A in aunt, S in Sally. And actually what those letters are telling us is they're telling us what order to do the problem in, where P stands for parentheses, the E stands for exponents, M is multiplication, D is dear, or D and dear is divide, the A and aunt is addition, and then the S and Sally is subtraction. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to go ahead and write these down so you know exactly. So when you're looking at a problem like the one I gave you before, the first word is the word please. So I'll write down step 1 here. The P in please, that's what we're going to do first because this is the first word, and the P stands for parentheses. Kind of a hard word to spell. Parentheses. Okay, so what we're looking for here, I'm sure you guys know what parentheses are, but we're looking for this sort of thing in the problem. And if there's something inside of there to do, like if there was a 5 plus 3 inside of the parentheses, then I would go ahead and do that first. So any type of grouping symbol, actually. Parentheses are the most common, but you do see some of these other things, all right, where these are kind of squared off like this. These are what we call brackets. You will also see these where they're kind of squiggly like this. They're hard to draw. Those are called braces. And then finally, you might get something that's just like this, where it's just 2 straight lines up and down, which are absolute value. So even though we use the word parentheses, actually, if we see any of those type of grouping symbols, those all fall under the word parentheses. Okay, so there's our first word. The please, the P stands for parentheses. That's the first thing that we're going to do. Okay, on to the second word. Excuse, which is the E. So this is step 2. The E stands for exponents, okay, which we already learned about. That was yesterday's lesson. Exponents. So any type of exponents, that would be done next. So if you see something like 2 to the 4th power or 3 to the 3rd power, any of those types of things, you're going to do that next. Okay. The next 2 steps are really, I think, where people mess up on. Okay, step 3. Well, the next word is my, but really the next step here, it says my dear. These two things both go together. So the M in my, which is multiplication, so multiply. But then the next word too is dear, where dear stands for divide. So I'm going to say multiply and divide. And this is where people go wrong because the M in my comes first, everybody thinks that multiplication always has to be done first. And in all actuality, that's not necessarily always true. Yes, sometimes multiply comes first, but you can also divide before multiplication on certain problems too. The rule of thumb here for step 3, when you come to multiply and divide, is that you need to work, I'll change colors here, you have to just start on the left and then go to the right. So you're going to work left to right. And whatever comes first comes first. If you hit division first, then you do the division first. If multiplication comes first, then you would do that. So step 3, after you do parentheses, after you do exponents, then any multiplication and divisions go together, but you have to work from left to right. Okay? And then finally, our last step here is step 4. Aunt Sally, this is another one. Okay? These two things are going to go together, where obviously the A stands for add. And the S in Sally stands for subtract. Okay? And again, these two things need to be done at the same time. Now, if you've done steps 1, 2, and 3, there should only be adding and subtracting left. And again, our goal here is to work from left to right. Left to right. Okay, let's try some problems here. Example 1. I want you guys to try these on your own. So evaluate means to solve these. Why don't you go ahead and pause the video, and when you're done with all 3 of them, come back and watch the answers be done. Make sure you pause it. Everybody should be working on these. Okay, coming back from trying it, hopefully everybody has answers. Again, I'm gonna remember the please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, or PEMDAS, as my rule of thumb here. It's going to tell me exactly how to do these. So when I'm doing part A, 50 plus 10 times 5, the two operations that I see here is an addition and I see a multiplication. Well, the first letter is P. There aren't any parentheses. Then comes the E. There aren't any exponents. Next comes multiply and divide. So any multiplications and divisions have to be done first. So the first operation that I need to do is this 10 times 5. Okay? So 10 times 5 is 50. And then I'm just going to rewrite everything else. The 50 and the plus comes down here. Then obviously there's only one operation left. That's to finish the addition. So 50 plus 50 gives me 100. Here's our final answer. And always circle your answer when you're done showing your work. Okay, part B. What I see here is I see just subtractions and additions. And again, this is the part that I think people mess up on because of please excuse my dear, the multiplication, then the division. And then same thing with the add and subtract. Everybody thinks addition has to be done first, and that's not the case. Even though, yes, there is an addition here, and the A comes before the S, that doesn't necessarily mean that we do it first. What we're going to do here is work from left to right because adding and subtracting have to be done at the same time. So when I do this first, I'm going to do the 12 minus 7 because if I start on the left, that's the first thing that comes up. So I end up getting 5, and then I'm going to rewrite. I still have the plus 3, and I still have the minus 6. Okay? Still going left to right. 5 plus 3 gives me 8. And then finally the minus 6. 8 minus 6 gives me 2 as my final answer. Okay, on to the last problem here. 54 divided by 9 times 3. Same thing, and that's why I put these problems on here. I want you guys to know that I see a division and a multiplication, but as we should know now, multiplication and division go at the same time, working from left to right. So even though the division comes because the multiplication, a lot of people want to do this 9 times 3 first because M comes before D, but that isn't the rule. Again, we have to work from left to right. So the first thing I'm going to do is the 54 divided by 9, which is going to give me, I'll change colors here, 54 divided by 9, which is going to give me 6, and then I still have that times 3, 6 times 3 gives me 18. Okay, now that we've done a couple of these, why don't we go back to that first problem, and if you got the right answer, fantastic. If you didn't get the right answer of 12, remember the answer's up here already. I'm going to show you how we're supposed to do that. So again, order of operation is we're going to use PEMDAS, P-E-M-D-A-S, and the first letter in the word PEMDAS, or the P in please, is to do parentheses. So step number one is I got to do that parentheses. Since there is an operation inside of the parentheses, I do that first. 2 plus 2 gives me 4. And everything else is just going to kind of come down along for the ride. So I'm going to rewrite the 20 minus 5. The times 2 is still there. The plus 8 is still here. And then divided by, instead of that parentheses, now we have divided by 4. Okay, so the P in parentheses is done. The P in please or parentheses. We move on to the E in the word excuse. E is exponents. I don't see any exponents that we need to do. So then I move on to the M and the D. Okay, multiply and divide. I do see a multiplication right here, and I do see a division right here. So I'm going to go ahead and do those two things. 5 times 2 gives me 10, and the division, 8 divided by 4 gives me 2. This addition sign symbol has to come down. The subtraction symbol has to come down, and the 20 has to come down. And now we can go ahead and finish the problem here. There's a subtraction and an addition, and so that brings me to Aunt Sally. Again, adding and subtracting should be done at the same time, working from left to right. So the first step that I'm going to do here is the 20 minus 10, which is going to give me 10. And then finally we have the plus 2, which gives us 12. And as I promised in the beginning, that should be our answer. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. If it's still something's not sitting right with you, ask a friend, ask me. Let's get it cleared up. If you're good to go, then I got 2 more problems for you here. So example 2, evaluate. Again, I'd like you guys to try these on your own if you feel confident that you know how to do it. And then after you're done, come on back and you can watch the video. Okay, so for part A here, again, I'm going to use please excuse my dear Aunt Sally to solve these. We're in part A here. The first thing I notice is that there is a parentheses, so I need to do that first. 8 minus 5 gives me 3. And personally, okay, when the 4 comes down here, I want you to be careful, because I've seen this done before, and you might think it's silly, but some people are going to write that 4, and then the 8 minus 5 is a 3, and a lot of people want to say the answer is 43. That's not the case. So personally, I like to keep the parentheses there. Now, there's nothing to do inside the parentheses, but I keep it there because that still lets me know that there's an operation, and that means it's a multiplication. The 4 times 3 is going to give me 12, again, for my final answer here. So, part B, you should have tried already. Let's go ahead and do this one. This one's a little goofy. What we should realize here is that there's a fraction bar, and the fraction bar is telling us to divide. Okay, and so there aren't any parentheses, there aren't any exponents. My PEMDAS here goes to multiplication and division, and I see a multiplication down on the bottom, the 2 times 5, and then I still have that division. But really, when we're working with fractions, in this case, the fraction bar has to be the last thing that's taken care of. So I've got to simplify everything on top and simplify everything on bottom before I do that division. So it's a little different when fractions are involved. I'll do the bottom first. 2 times 5 gives me 10. On the top, we have 13 plus 7, which is 20. And now that I simplified both of those things, I can do the 20 divided by 10, which is going to give us a final answer of 2. Okay, I got one last example for us, and then we'll call it quits for the day. Example 3. So now we've got an expression here, x minus 3y to the 3rd power. They want us to solve this. So they're telling us what x is. They're telling us that x is 25. They're telling us that y is going to equal 2. Step number 1 is, since I already have the thing here, my x minus 3y to the 3rd power, the first thing you need to do is take the values of the variables, x being 25, y being 2, and I'm going to plug those into the problem. So the 25 here is going to be plugged in for the x, so that becomes a 25 minus, and again, when I write the 3y to the 3rd power, because this 2 is going to go in place of y, what I like to do, because I don't want it to read like 32 when I plug that 2 in there, I'm going to put it in parentheses just to remind myself that it's separate from the 3. And don't forget that exponent was on the y. It was a y to the third power. And since y is 2, it becomes 2 to the third power. Using order of operations, now I do see that there's a parentheses. However, there isn't anything in the parentheses to do, so I can move past the parentheses. Okay, so we're done with the p. Now we move on to the e, which stands for exponent. Well, I have an exponent here, 2 to the third power. So that means to do 2 times 2 times 2. Well, 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 gives me 8. So in solving that, and I still am going to keep it in parentheses, 2 to the third power gives me that 8. And I keep it in parentheses because I like to keep it separate from that 3 that's out in front of it. Everything else can come on down for the ride. Okay, so I did the parentheses, I did exponents, next comes multiplication and division to be done together. Well, I see a multiplication. I have this 3 times 8, which is 24, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. The 25 comes down, the subtraction comes down, and then very simply, everybody can finish it off from here. 25 minus 24, final answer of 1. That concludes our lesson for today.